It seems like there are almost an infinite number of ways to review Yu-Gi-Oh cards. You can review their artwork, how cool do they look? You can review their price, how high or low or expensive or inexpensive are these cards, maybe if you're a Market Watch channel. If you're a more casual player, you can review them, how good are they in casual gameplay duels. But I personally don't do any of those things, usually. I mean, sometimes I mention the artwork, but usually when I review cards, if you see any one of my videos, it's going to be from mostly a competitive standpoint. That's how I view the game, it's how I like to review things, and in today's video I'm going to talk about why that is, because there have been a wave of confused commenters on like my Elemental Hero video and my Destiny Hero video, and I think that's because a lot of players that are playing Duel Links maybe perhaps are coming to those videos and very confused at where I'm coming from, and that's perfectly fine because I do try my best to sort of talk about at the very beginning of those types of videos where I'm coming from when I review cards, but not everyone listens to that. I understand that people just skip forward to whenever the first card is mentioned, and they skip by that first like minute or minute and a half because like, oh, he's not talking about the cards yet, I just want to get to the cards. And while that is fine, I really do try to put the intros in the videos to give as much context as possible. For example, in that Destiny Hero video, I really did hone in on the fact that there are going to be cards that if you play Duel Links or you play Destiny Heroes right now that you're going to feel are missing from this list. And the reason those cards were going to be missing from a list is that we're only talking about cards in that video at least that were competitively viable at some point, the most competitively viable Destiny Hero monsters in the entire game's history. So when you watch a Dzeeff video, you're probably going to find cards analyzed in 3 different ways. Maybe not all of them for every card, but these are the usual 3 ways that I want to look at cards when I make videos. Sometimes these change depending on how old or new the cards are. So first off, when you're looking at like a video like the E Hero or the D Hero video, the type of analysis you're gonna mostly find are how good the card was in the past. When we're looking at older cards especially, this is very, very important because this is something that you'll also see in like many of my Why Nobody Plays videos, like the Egyptian God videos. I'll mention time and time again how good were these cards when they actually came out. So you can kind of see here there's a big difference between looking at cards in the past and looking at how good they are right now. But in a lot of videos, especially the ones where I talk about older cards, I feel it is very, very important to look up the history of the card and see if it was competitively viable in the past. So when you look at those Elemental Hero videos and the Destiny Hero videos, the reason that there's so many old cards that haven't topped in years, it's because I was trying to come up with the list for the top 5 hero monsters of their respective sub-archetypes of the entire history of the game. Therefore, even if a card hasn't topped in 10 years, if it topped a whole bunch 10 years ago, it's going to make it on that list. This also explains why certain more recent Destiny Hero monsters didn't make it into those videos, because while those cards might be played in a more recent version of Destiny Heroes, they don't have a lot of competitive success to actually back up how good or bad they are. Because the second way that we really look at cards on this channel, and probably the biggest way besides the past, is how good these cards are in current competitive tournaments, and that is a big deal. And it's usually what I'm doing here is I'm looking at the past, looking at the present. If you go back to those E Hero and D Hero videos, you'll notice that even though it's mostly focused on how good the cards were in the past, because those cards haven't been good for a while, I do at the very least mention if they could be played even in some sort of casual strategy in the present, because I do feel that it is pretty important. The third and final way that I look at cards, although this isn't very common, is I look at how good cards will be in the future. I'm not the best Yu-Gi-Oh player, I don't claim to be the greatest person out there, but I do enjoy looking at data, and when you have a new card, a card that hasn't been played yet, a card that hasn't been released yet, there's no data for it. If you think back to like the Blue Eyes Alternative Ultimate Dragon reveal, I did a video on that. If you think about Nibiru getting revealed, I did a video on that. But in general, on this channel at least, I usually talk about cards that are already released in the current TCG format. And I do this because I'm not the greatest player. I think it's important to go back and look at these deck profiles and say, okay, maybe I didn't know how to play Darkroom Dragon Return when I was in middle school, but other people did, and I can look at their deck list and see which Destiny Hero monsters they were playing and talk about them in a video. If you wonder why I often talk about older cards or older strategies, it's because those are the things that we have the most data on. We know the god cards, the wicked gods, the Nordic gods, the Egyptian gods, whatever. It seems like most god cards aren't very good, and we know that because those cards in most cases have been out for 10 plus years and no one's really played them consistently at a competitive level. So now you have the basic idea of how I try to set up all of my videos, or at least most of them. We're looking at how good cards were in the past, in the present, and then sometimes you look at how good they might be in the future. And there are other ways to analyze cards. Sometimes people just look at cards in a vacuum. How strong is the card just by itself, not compared to other cards cards in the format. Personally, I don't think that's the best way to review cards from a competitive standpoint, but at least from a casual viewpoint, that's perfectly acceptable. Like, you can do whatever you want. It's your own YouTube channel, but on my channel specifically, I choose to look at how good cards are competitively or how good they have been in the past or future. And I do this because I don't know everything. I can't look at every card and just say this card is good or this card is bad. I have to use the data to sort of back up what I'm talking about, and the only way to do that, the only data we really have, is from tournament results, deck profiles, stuff like that, blog posts, articles from the past. And that's awesome because all that stuff is out there for any player that's interested in learning about it. And that's one of the ways, or one of the many ways, that I can look at how good cards actually were, because we can sit here and speculate all day about how good a card might have been in the past, but why bother doing that when we can just look up the data and see if it was actually being played at a tournament level? And I think this is where the main confusion stemmed from with Elemental Hero's Solid Soldier. I will say right now that in an Elemental Hero deck or a Destiny Hero deck that you're playing in 2019, it absolutely should have a copy or 2 or 3 of Elemental Hero Solid Soldier. In those decks, it is one of the better cards. The main problem with that card and why it wasn't featured on the top 5 Elemental Hero list is that that card is not a very competitively viable card. I know it sounds crazy, especially to players that are playing heroes right now and they're saying, well, this is a main card in my deck. The problem is that a card like that, even if it's good on paper, if it's not being played in a competitively viable deck right now or in the past, then it's not a very competitive card. And I know that sounds weird to some people that are playing these decks, but you really have to go off the fact that a card like Solid Soldier, it's been out for over a year now and it has less than 10 tops. Sure, it has gotten a couple regional tops and 1 top 64 at a WCQ, but what you find when you look at a card like that is that that is not very successful. A card topping once does not make it a competitively viable card, because there are people taking all sorts of decks, all sorts of strategies, all sorts of tech options to tournaments around the world every single weekend. But just because a card can top a few small times at some regional qualifiers does not mean that the deck or the card itself is competitively viable, because anything can top given the right setup. Sometimes that could mean that someone got really lucky that day. They drew insane, their opponents drew bad. Sometimes it means that the right setup is that a very good player, a really good player like Jesse Cotton, plays like the Egyptian gods at a regional, and even though they're in his deck and the god cards have now topped a regional, quote unquote, they topped a regional because they're in the hands of one of the best players that the game currently has to offer in an already very strong deck. Did the god cards really help? Probably not, but they still technically topped under the right circumstances. And trust me, this isn't the first time I've made a decision like this, because for example, Blue Eyes Chaos Max Dragon has a few tops, actually even less than Solid Soldier, so not very many. I think it has like 3 or 4 tops, and a couple of them are at regionals. I think one might be at a YCS top 82 or top 16, but in general, a card topping a few times doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. When I'm talking about cards, like in those Destiny Hero and Elemental Hero videos, those are cards that have seen like hundreds of top cut lists, and that means that those cards are very competitively viable over many different formats. Even a card like Destiny Hero Dasher, which was going to be my honorable mention in the Destiny Hero video and I forgot to put it in, even that card has seen like several hundred tops, especially 10 years ago, but it wasn't quite good enough to make it into the video. When you're looking at like that Elemental Hero video as well, you see cards that have seen tops across many formats, so no, Solid Soldier getting less than 10 tops over a year of being out doesn't really impress me, because putting that card on that list instead of any of the other Elemental Hero monsters would have been lying to you guys. It would have been dishonest, it would have been disingenuous, and that's really what I try to avoid in my discussion videos. I don't want to sugarcoat a card and say, okay, Solid Soldier is one of the best E-Hero monsters right now, so I'm going to put it on this list of all these historically best Elemental Hero monsters, because that's simply not true. It has like so many less tops than all of the cards that I put on that list. Even some cards that I didn't even mention, like Elemental Hero Ocean, has way more tops than Solid Soldier probably ever will have unless they get some crazy support in the future. But that video wasn't about which Elemental Hero cards are the best right now, it was about which Elemental Hero cards were the best in Yu-Gi-Oh's history. There is a big difference between answering current decklist questions and old decklist questions or historical questions, because a card like Solid Soldier didn't exist back when E-Heroes were in their prime, so it never really had a chance to be competitive. Is the card good? Sure, I guess in a hero deck it could be, but as far as tournament results go, the card just isn't very viable. It hasn't had a chance to prove itself, and that means that in a video talking about about the best hero cards in history, it's simply not going to make the list. And you're not obligated, of course, to agree with how I review Yu-Gi-Oh cards. You can go find other channels that review them for how cool they look, or how good they are right now, or how good they are in casual play. That's not what you're going to find on my channel, at least not in those types of videos. When I do videos on the current metagame, which I haven't done for Elemental Heroes because they're not a very strong deck, but when you see videos out there like 5 best tech options for this event, or 5 tech options that came out of this YCS, I'm doing that talking mostly about the present and the future, not so much the past, because the people watching those videos want to think about and sort of decide on what cards can I put in my deck right now that'll be competitively viable and make my deck stronger. And this probably feels like a weird topic to be talking about, but I really feel like on these Elemental Hero videos and the Destiny Hero videos that I got more of these comments than I have recently, and I don't know why that was, especially considering in both those videos, in the first minute, I very clearly state we're only talking about competitive TCG success. I know people don't always watch the intro, they skip it sometimes, but just in general, it caught me off guard, so I feel like making a more updated version of this discussion I've done a few times, like a year ago, I thought that was a pretty good idea, so I just want to mention it in a video. Here's how I analyze cards. You don't have to agree with it, you don't have to analyze cards the same way, but if you're coming to my channel and you're confused why certain cards aren't talked about, this is why they probably weren't mentioned in the video. Sometimes I make mistakes, but a lot of times I try to do my research as thoroughly as possible, and usually when you watch a video of mine that's like the top 5 Elemental Hero monsters, you can assume that all the monsters I'm talking about have seen widespread competitive success in the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG, and you'll know I did pretty much as much research as possible or necessary for that particular topic, because I do feel that's a very important part of making YouTube videos about this game. Anyway though, hopefully you guys enjoyed today's discussion video. I know it's a little bit different, but I felt it was very important to talk about, and I haven't talked about it in quite a while. So for all the new viewers out there, hopefully this helped explain how I do my list, because it is pretty important to know when you're watching a top 5 video, what criteria are they using to pick those top 5 cards. I'll see you later though. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.